Jenny. We're going to call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the ARPA Commission on February 6th, at 1:30 in the afternoon. 2023 is the year. We have a quorum. We are missing Stu Cobb, Samantha Hills, and Donna Kinsley. But otherwise, everybody's here. First item is approval of minutes, and as I said when I sent out the meeting materials to you all, we already did approve the 12/19 minutes at the January 23rd meeting. So if someone wants to make a motion to approve the January 9th or the January 23rd, you can entertain that.
I'll move to approve the January 9th, 2023 minutes and January 23 minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Discussion about those minutes?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for doing them.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
No problem.
Lovely.
All right, no, nothing. So let's see, let's vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? All right, we're up to date with our minutes, which is very exciting. Okay. Let's see, updates on the previously funded requests. This is our standard list that, you know, we look at every meeting, and if there's been a change to something, we can talk about it, but I haven't heard of any big changes or updates regarding any of these. I don't know if anybody else does. No?
I'll just give you a little update. I did hear back from IT last week. Looks like we may be sooner than expected have the Wi-Fi project in this building completed. So we're waiting for the remainder of the devices. And so it sounds like they will be in soon. So
Okay,
I'm hoping.
great.
So maybe next month we'll be able to close that project.
Okay. Stu Cobb is here. He's joining us.
Yes, I.
Stu, the ambulance. I know I just saw from Donna that another expenditure just came in.
Yes,
So are you guys close to closing it?
close. That was the last big expenditure. I think that only leaves us about $3,500 left.
Mhm.
So we'll be close. So we're soon.
Okay.
But was that the last expenditure?
There's one more pending that we're waiting to see if we can afford it, and I think we will, so.
Okay.
All right. Anything else about any other projects? Jenny?
Hi, so as you may have noticed, I put a pile of these on the table. This is just basically a little overview of the residents that we've been able to assist with ARPA 21, the Fuel Bank and Home Heating Assistance Program this year. So I wanted to make sure that you all had that information so you would know exactly how many families and residents this has helped this year.
And Jenny, can you remind us how much has been spent out of the ARPA? Out of 20?
It's 14,000 and something. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a good chunk of it for sure.
Okay,
At this point, I'm utilizing the fuel bank funds only, so that way we can hopefully have this fund for the future.
great. Great. I'm just looking at the expenditure report that Donna sent us. I mean, I don't see anything else that's like ringing any bells for me of something that we've heard about just in the last couple of weeks. So I think we are up to date. I think we can move on. I can go back to the agenda. Okay, so funding request submissions. So this is where, oh,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Talking out loud.
Yeah, we didn't have any to close this time. So So we still have on our list, there's 4 items, the ARPA 40, which is the library gutters and downspout replacement, the ARPA 40D, the library exterior window treatment, ARPA 42, center school playground resurfacing, and ARPA 45, economic development strategic plan. And, oh yeah, that's what I forgot to do, is correspondence, which is item 4, which was to let you all know that we got a request from the CIP committee to use ARPA funds for the facility study for town buildings that was submitted to the CIP committee. And to have that also include the library as part of the study, and that's sort of how the discussion has come around, because there's so many, these projects that we're seeing here at ARPA are also on the list for CIP in this current year and in some of the out years. And so the discussion kind of went around to, we need a facility study to really know which one of these things is the most important and what order they should be done in. And then we realized there is a facility study that's going to be done. We should just add the library onto that. And then here we are, because CIP said, well, maybe ARPA could pay for this as a first step. So I don't know if you want to explain more, Erica.
Sure, so I apologize, well, Jenny doesn't have one, I have copies here in the room. I gave you a sample scope of services that the town of Mansfield did. And so this was, again, after a similar project where they had a new school project. So they combined 3 schools to 1 and then did a solicitation for all of their town buildings. They had 16. And the cost to them, there was some discussion about what this would cost, was $103,000 based on their facilities. So certainly our list is smaller. I would think between $40,000 and $50,000 would be enough. The question is, do we include the fire departments in that study? And I have mixed feelings in one direction or the other, but you can see some of the scope of services was to do a space and use needs analysis, evaluating the current locations, utilizing any existing deficiency reports, plans, other studies they had to evaluate, and also evaluating existing repairs. And so that's certainly where the library piece would come into play. We certainly know without question that the use of the library and the intended space analysis there, I don't think that's what we're questioning. It's a matter of what it needs as far as actual structural or maintenance components inside the building. So utilizing this scope of service to get an idea, it was taking the request from the Board of Selectmen, the needs of the library, seeing that the library board, certainly this, we've discussed ad nauseum that this is outside their scope of work, their base of knowledge, and recognizing that, and how can we best help them be successful in at repairing what needs to be done and maintaining that building. And this assessment can help us and certainly help them, basically give them kind of a roadmap to follow, at least for the interim, I would hope 10 to 15 years out. And so with that, it was, can we utilize ARPA funds and not CIP funds and complete an assessment of all of our town facilities? But again, what we need to determine is what those are, what that scope is, and specifically the fire departments, as they are moving in a direction of utilizing a study to put on an addition at Willington 1, and then the request from Willington Hill to build an entirely new firehouse. So that's where we're at.
So the schools are included?
The schools would be
Well, they
included.
were in Mansfield.
They were, they would be now. So based on one, we knew center school would be included if we had a positive referendum on a project, because it was always excluded from the 2 options at at the school building committee level. And now the school building committee has put forth a single project, and that's a new school on a new site. So I would say we would include Hall School, although there's the large discussion about the fact that it will revert to the Hall Foundation. I think it's important for us to note that there would be discussions between the Hall Foundation and the town and that, and so some big decisions to make. So I think including that in this facility study would be important, so we know what needs to be done there, depending on the needs, so that you've got the needs of the town and the buildings we have and how we can fit those needs into the facilities we do have.
Okay,
So not just repairs, but how do we maintain the services we have here with the buildings we have in town?
Does ARPA open enough applications to make this request come through?
That's a good question. That's what I was gonna ask, is how we would do this. Because we would have to go to public hearing with this particular one, and we haven't opened it up. I think this one is a little bit different because it has come through the CIP committee as a request. But other people might feel differently about that.
Yeah, and I think it's, we got several projects from the library, and I think we all had concerns about, was there more than that? Were there steps between, their different projects that were being missed? And this can help answer those questions. So before we give the money to move forward with the project and then find out something else needed to be done, or find out in the middle of a project something needs to be done. That's where this one is a little bit different, but I don't disagree. It should go through the whole process we've gone with everything else. But I don't know that we would be opening it up to other projects. I don't necessarily see that. We know we don't have enough funds for everything we have. But how do we fund some of these library projects if we question whether or not they're the appropriate projects to be doing at this time? And this study can help us get to some of those answers.
Is there a willingness on behalf of the CIP folks to implement the study? Because, I mean, this is very much a CIP plan. This is a plan that they'll use for the next 10 or 15 years. ARPA aside, if we disperse the funds, we come and go. And, just like with every other plan or document that the town prepares, if the CIP folks are interested in using this to actually fund repairs, then I think it makes sense and it's a good use of funds. But $50,000, I don't know. I certainly haven't been here long enough, but there's not necessarily an eagerness to repair things as soon as they're identified. And so spending 50 grand to have a study to say, oh, geez, it's way worse than we thought, because I imagine that's what it's going to say. If CIP is not willing to pony up, then all we're going to do is have a list of problems that we now know exist. And with other things, you don't necessarily want to have a list of problems because you have certain obligations to fix them if it's a public building. So I guess I would want to know that CIP is committed to taking this report and actually funding or prioritizing and doing that. So that a $10,000 job 3 or 5 or 10 years from now isn't 50,000, because that's how long it takes for someone to finally say, let's do it.
Well, the point of CIP would be to put it on the plan for 3 years from now and know it's coming. So I can't speak for the whole CIP, but the CIP plan is really the selectmen's plan.
All right, but I think the discussion of the CIP committee was that we could use this for the basis of our plan, and then have some backup for the items that were on there as far as our facilities go, right? So you may end up with some other things in that project, vehicles, roads, maybe some fire apparatus that wouldn't be covered in this. But this would cover the scope of the needs in a very specific time frame for our facility, so it wouldn't be a surprise. And it would give each budget writer who runs and maintains that building the ability to look and see, all right, this is what I'm going to need to submit to CIP, and that blueprint is already there. So I guess short answer is, I think the current CIP is committed to utilizing this information to put forth a plan that ultimately will go beyond just that committee there, an advisory committee. But yes, I think there's a want to have all that information. And instead of doing it, just, make sure it's broad enough that it meets all of the needs. So the reason it was requested in the first place was because we knew we would have some buildings that wouldn't be used. We know we have challenges with the building that we're in, and we know the library has some issues. So I can say, for my perspective, it would be easy to take back to CIP and know for unless something new comes up, to say this is the outline of requests at CIP, and CIP knows, and it will help that process. You should start, out in year 5 and work your way up the plan. It shouldn't be a whole new plan every year,
Right.
but this will be an investment in that.
And one of the things that came up at CIP is this library exterior window treatment, the paint project for $50,000. When they actually put it in their CIP plan, they put it in year 3 and said that they have to do some other things before they do that. And then we said, well, year 3 puts us out of you being able to use the ARPA funds, because, we'd be pushing it by doing that. And so, like, what are the things that they have to do before they do that? Then maybe we should fund some of those things. Or we just do the study and figure out what the things are. Really figure it out. So that's where we ended up.
And my thought is those requests that they had in the out years on CIP should probably stay there, and it kind of reflects the lack of immediate need. Will need to be painted someday, absolutely. But based on their CIP request, it's not something that needs to be done, this season or even next.
Right.
But it was specifically in conflict with what they submitted to us.
That's right.
So, and that was, again, recognizing they're so far outside of their lane, and there has to be a better process to assist with that. So this was one discussion, the other was a need for a facilities director. But we're not gonna ask you to fund that.
Right. I do think something we could take action on today is removing the exterior window treatment project off of the list. Because they're not gonna get to it in the time that they need to. That's one. The gutters and downspout, that's a little bit different. I think they could do that. Do they need to do that? That's a whole other question.
Would that facility study say yes or no to that?
I think it would. I think it would.
So then I think we should wait to see what happens.
Mhm.
And if we still have some
Because
funds left at ARPA, we leave it here for consideration.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. The study's gonna take a while before, let's say we were in favor of going forward with it, then we would go to public hearing, then it could get started, but it's gonna take months and months to do. It's not like, we're not gonna get it in this budget cycle, the information we need to decide this or CIP things. But,
No, and they wouldn't get to do any of it until the late spring or summer, depending on a contractor anyway, so, it doesn't mean that it has to come off of ARPA, that we can still leave those ARPA dollars potentially available. But let's see if it's something that's identified, or if there was something that was identified prior to doing that might affect that work. That's what I'm more concerned about. That, they've outlined some steps, and they have admitted that they don't know what they don't know. So,
But I'll agree, the gutters are a problem in the end in terms of the water overflowing onto the walkway and freezing. And that appears to be what happens. I'm still unsure if their magic fix for a deeper gutter
me too.
to, gutters made to move water, not hold it. So I still have my doubts if that's the immediate solution for that.
Agreed. Because this could be something that's not identified at all. And then we say, what other things you put in place? And I think Troy's talked about some other options, because most of their concern about the gutters is winter, not the rest of the rainy time, specifically around water and temperatures. So I think there might, if it's not an identified item, there's maybe a much less expensive solution. than only gutters and downspouts, but, you know, again, I think we've all said we want them to be successful in maintaining and managing of this building. I think we can assist with that.
I'd like to think the library board is somewhat happier with the process now combined with CIP of the projects they've identified, and they are in the plan, subject to modification, of course, but where I think they early in the process, they felt they were on kind of the outside looking in and, you know, terrible us for not saying yes to everything right away.
You were at that CIP meeting when they presented, right? Were you at that?
Mhm.
Yeah, and they were, right? They were very, I think they were happy with the discussion of this and saw that they're just gonna continue to share with us the same information they got from a vendor. That's all of their knowledge.
Right.
And we still had other questions and they just couldn't answer. So there was definitely some positive feedback.
And I think it was helpful to the CIP process where they recognized in their submission to spread some of these out over time, depending on how big a priority things are, like painting the inside of the library. Will need to be painted at some point, absolutely. But their building's not gonna fall down because it didn't get painted this year. And
Right.
they did well, like spreading those requests out.
You know, I think they did a great job.
Yeah, the big aha was the building envelope project, which is $80,000, and they realized that's what they need to do before they do the windows. And they didn't, windows are actually in. Actually, are the windows on?
It's like fell under the exterior.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's in
Together.
year four of the plan, so.
Yeah, so if we give it to them now, are they going to go out and do it? Even though they've recognized not, I think now the conversation is they'd say, wait, we don't need to do it, but when does it need to get done? And it will be past ARPA in year 4. So,
Right.
Couldn't the town put this into a building? Couldn't you put this into a general budget line to offset maintenance or renovations or whatever? Couldn't you take a portion of the funds left and put it there to work to implement the facility study once that was done? If you take it as lost revenue, you could put it back into the budget. Question is, how would you, I guess, how would you carry it over to that point in the fiscal year? We would meet the ARPA criteria, but I don't know how you carry it 3 years out from now,
I
Yeah,
don't know you would,
unless you somehow, yeah.
but we might be able to identify some other things. And fund them now instead of waiting, you know, so maybe we fund 2 of their projects that they had in year 1 and year 2 with ARPA dollars potentially, depending on what the cost looks like, and then leave it on the CIP plan in those out years. They were very, they weren't hesitant to say, we know we can't do it all at once and we're not gonna get it all funded, right? So they were open to, this may take some time and has to be spread out over years. But the library board was kind of on board with the study portion happening. And yes, while I'm hesitant to say we need another study, but another study that at least the current folks at the table are willing to use as a guide for the needs of the town, I think is important.
Mhm. And to them, it shouldn't matter if it's ARPA funds or if it's reserve funds or if it's LoCIP funds or whatever the source is, but they just need the money one way, and they need it in the timing they need it. So I just don't think they should be too hung up on if it came from ARPA or not.
And I don't think they were, I didn't get that, I think
they've
discussion.
realized now.
Yeah,
What it is. I think there was confusion at the beginning of the process about that. Like there was a desperation to get the ARPA
Oh,
funds
it was their
because,
first funding source, I think they saw, and then after.
yeah. Then realized there's lots of funding sources. They just had never been they weren't in the game yet. So now they are, and they're in there.
Are you open to any motions at this point?
Sure, yeah, you got a motion to make?
Sure, to remove the library window painting repairs from the ARPA request.
ARPA 40B.
Sure, I believe you. I don't know.
40B. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Troy seconded. All right, any discussion about that?
What is the proposal?
To remove so the library, one of their requests was to do the windows, but they can't do it for another 4 years. So his motion is to remove it from consideration.
Okay,
And I can tell you, if we do remove it, then that changes our funding picture too, because now we would be at, like $5,000 still remaining, even after the contingency, 50,000. So,
But not, that's just based on the projects we have. or
right,
anything,
so if we
it's not-
added
not
another one
this one.
in for the facility study, we would
Right.
kind of be back to where we're starting from, but just so you know. Any discussion about that one? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye. Well, I'm not opposed. I'm voting aye.
Is that Samantha?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're abstaining.
No, I'm saying I'm voting aye. Yes,
Oh, I see.
remove it.
Okay,
I just
right,
got on
so-
here late.
so that motion passes, so we will remove that one. And then I'll change my spreadsheet right now. Do we have another motion?
The playground resurfacing for center school, on the list there.
Yeah,
And what was the dollar amount on that one?
that one's
90.
90, that's a big one.
I'd like to table it, make a motion to table that till after the referendum.
Okay,
I know the playground can be used, if they do end up leaving the school, we may need it sooner than later, but.
The agenda's, sorry,
I'd like to see the direction going, knowing where we're going with that to, for committee to that.
the agenda says it was tabled 123. Did we already make the decision to table, or did we just decide not to do anything at the last meeting?
We decided not to do anything about
We
it.
didn't officially.
So I think they're all. kind
I
of
think they're all
tabled.
tabled.
I think they're all
They're
tabled
all-
as part,
they're all on
so
the
yeah,
tabled
we'll
mode.
need a table.
all right, so do you want to withdraw your motion?
It's still gonna be tabled, yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, so all that's left would be, that's tabled, and the EDC plan for $40,000 is currently in the tabled mode, and the library gutters and downspouts is tabled. That's all, that's what we've got.
I'd like to discuss ARPA 45, the EDC.
Okay,
I think we might, I know that the money is kind of tight right now, but I really think this is important to do because we're gonna need income. We need to raise our tax base. I went to Ellington this weekend, and Ellington is gorgeous. Wellington is not Ellington, I know that, but, and we're not Stafford, but they have their tax base is quite large.
And very.
And varied, yeah. So I think this is kind of important to get moving, because if we build a new school and we're gonna have all these buildings that need repairs, we're gonna need money to do it. And how are we gonna do that without increasing our tax base and welcoming businesses that the townspeople want? And, the POCD is screaming a different avenue for how we should build our businesses. So I don't know, I think it's important. I know money's tight, but I honestly, in my opinion, I think that's important because we need money. So I'm listening off my soapbox now.
I agree in the concept. My concern is the townspeople, based on their history over the last 15, 20 years, generally not supported any business coming into town. When FedEx came in, there was a lawsuit against them. When the trucks, TA truck stop came in, there was a lawsuit. It took Love's 13 years to get permission for a variety of reasons. To build what I call an overgrown Cumberland Farms with some extra parking. And then also based on this last proposal with the warehouse. And, you know, so EDC is gonna be out on one side saying, hey, you know, there's some properties we've identified or potential uses. Try to, you know, locate some people or businesses that wanted to come into town. But if the townspeople were gonna say no to everything, or at the very least make it difficult for years and years, you just spend money for a plan to say it's what we do to get businesses in, but everybody else is on the other side pulling out the POCD or any other reason to say, no, 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 we don't like this. We want Wellington to remain the way Wellington is. And then we're stuck with not having any money to fix it.
I guess that's why I was hopeful that this study will maybe kind of coincide with what the people want, the townspeople want versus, you know, what, you know, maybe like a happy medium, I guess is why I was saying that. I was hoping that. Because I know that that was the reason why this is brought up, is because the warehouse is the perfect example that people don't want that. They want something else. They want like a mom and pop shop, or they want to put houses there or whatever, but I mean, we have to have some kind of business in here. So what do the townspeople want to put up with versus, you know, what wants to be come in? We're right in the middle of the highway, so we can welcome. I think that we have pristine areas for some kind of business to come in, but what will,
Right,
what
well,
will go here? What will people welcome?
will this plan, Mike, and maybe you can speak to this, help us determine that, right? So between what the average resident wants and what business has shown interest, I think it's very clear that our proximity to 84 and our frontage on 84 is enticing to a certain kind of business. That's evident in the truck stops, FedEx, and this last proposal. But that clearly is not what our townspeople want to see. So I'm curious if you can tell us how you feel this plan can, you know, work between the two.
So the POCD is a blue sky document. People meet when there's no development on the table and they talk about what they want, and more or less everything that is reviewed and discussed makes it into the plan. So the plan talks about expanding to commercial developments, talks about expanding the zones in which commercial developments should be allowed or where those zones are. Talks about preservation of open space. It talks about everything. You can't do everything. So the challenge with POCDs is exactly that, is that you can always point to something that the POCD is supportive of and also that it's not in alignment with. You can find sections in the POCD which support warehousing and sections which say we shouldn't allow it. This is, in reviewing the minutes when I just did them for the hearing, it's this idea of sort of mirroring market data and looking at a build out analysis and determining what we would need to do to actually unbuild or facilitate what the public is saying they can tolerate, right? It's easy to say we want to have a coffee shop or we want to have a bank or we want to have this or that, but there's very defined data that those businesses would use to determine if it makes sense to locate here. And we may be able to put our finger on the scale with some of that stuff. So we kind of need to understand, based upon what the public is saying that they are supportive of, what we need to do to make that happen. So it's taking some of the stuff that the POCD has and actually using information to implement it, rather than just this sort of blue sky, we want this, but have not at all considered the market or the process or the fact that Wellington is not Manchester, and kind of mirroring all of that to kind of come up with what our realistic expectations can be for the types of businesses we can see in the areas that we have. So there would obviously be a public outreach component, but it would be far more tailored than just tell me what you think we should do, preserve open space or include commercial development, because people support both of those in many cases. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's, the important conversation is gonna be between the residents to understand what we want isn't always what can happen, and that's what you talked about. I know you already dropped the cost of this from 60 to 40. You think you can do it? You think it could come in any less than that?
I mean, one of the things that is involved with this is doing some of those build out analysis once we get to a point where we have some type of consensus, but also trying to gather the actual market data. So the reason we dropped it is because we think we can do more of the time type stuff related to public outreach or having meetings sort of cover multiple things rather than having a lot of smaller meetings. But I don't know. I mean, obviously, if we didn't get funded in the full amount, we would go out and look to see what we could get done for that. I don't know the difference between 30 or 40. It's tough to.
And my last question is, some of the towns that are like Wellington,
Mhm.
so I won't compare us to Manchester or any other town. Is this something that have they implemented something similar that you might know about that help them be successful in a direction?
I think that, I know towns have done things similar to this, and we actually did with the EDC pre-COVID, something not overall, but we did like a development guide, and we used data that was available publicly, which is no longer available. It's not a data vintage that's continuing to be updated. But this is something, yeah, I think that is, we're a little bit different in that we have areas that don't necessarily naturally lend themselves to commercial development. So there's more work that we have to do. Dollar General and Dunkin' Donuts, that's an analysis that those corporations did, and it worked within their pro forma. So that's why we got them here. It's not because of anything local. But if we know that we have an area that meets the certain parameters of certain types of businesses, and that Wellington's supportive of those businesses, then we can go out and strategically try to get those sites ready for that type of development. Mansfield has a more natural commercial corridor. They have a stronger population base in Yukon, which makes people more interested. So they have a different type of development pressure. I don't know off the top of my head of any specific examples of, I mean, towns do a lot of strategic plans. There's several towns that have them overall, and it includes a facility study, and I mean, it's everything. And yet sometimes that's a little bit larger, but that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is really almost like a strategic marketing analysis to figure out kind of what we talked about.
Could that play into the fact that the whole school facility may be empty in the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think as part of that, you could start to look at, for some of those specific analyses, what between the market and the building, and kind of pull all that together and get a sense of what legitimate and viable reuse strategies could be for that. Because again, the first thing people will say is housing. If you talk to an architect, he'll tell you it's not great for housing. You lose way too much space in the corridors. You don't have enough space in the classrooms. And so it's not great. You're going to gut the whole building. Is it worth keeping? So like simple discussions like that really help us inform people that we shouldn't just put all of our eggs in. Yeah, we're going to call it senior housing. So that's not really a marketable use for it. So someone either needs to find free money to make it make sense, or we need to find a plan B. Because you don't want to rely, I mean, we talked about this with CIP and others, you don't want to rely on information that's not really been ground truth, and then find out, you know, it's only 10% right as compared to what reality actually is.
Samantha just texted me. She said she's raised her hand, but I don't see her.
She
the
came
thing.
on screen and
I
went
think
off, and
this
I could hear her.
probably is just.
Yeah, no, I know.
This is just showing people that are on
Well,
screen.
there's-
Hi.
Hi.
Yep.
No,
Yeah, I had come on because I didn't know if you could see my hand, and then I was like raising my hand, but it's fine.
there was no box for you.
Well, that's because I didn't, right, it says you can only see on-screen participants.
Oh,
I
I
just don't have
see,
the
I see.
participants box open.
I see. Okay, sorry.
Hi, everyone. Mike, that was really great explanation. I was actually going to ask Mike because, you know, I've been just working, sorry, I mean, I've really been low on my attendance here, and have missed a couple EDC, but we did discuss it the last time that I was there, and I think that gives a good picture, but I just wanted to give a little bit of background about it as well. And thank you, Robin, for seeing the importance of it, because it isn't just, it is for an ultimate purpose, to do what you're saying, is to find ways to increase the tax base to take some of the burden off of the taxpayers. And I think one of the reasons that we feel that we need it is because we are volunteer. It's so small now. There's like three to four members. We did just get an inquiry. I don't know if they reached out to the Board of Selectmen about potentially another member, which would be great. But due to some of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think that due to some of the overlap with planning and zoning, I thought we were using this a little bit to work with planning and zoning, because when we worked on the strategic development zones, like it wasn't intended, it wasn't, it's intended to allow somebody to come in, but not quite obviously as large as they were, but to allow somebody to come in and kind of circumvent this long, arduous process to be able to put a business in. So those, I thought, were some of the other things we were looking at, is what types of policies might we create to make the environment more business friendly. I don't know if that would be like, adjusting their taxes for the first several years, just different things that we could do. But one of the things that we've talked about and we never seem to find time to do, there's two things. One is we are working on the signage. I think that would bring some kind of conformity and consistency and just maybe bring some interest in the unity of the town. But then like defining it, so it is important. It's like a branding. And then the other thing is to do some more resident surveys, because one of the areas that I believe has been identified is like in the village area. And that's somewhere where we could, have mixed use. And there's the sidewalk project going in there. I feel like that would be a great area to make it slightly walkable, and have like a coffee shop or something like that. Now, you are correct that people have not historically supported it. And I know that that's discouraging, but I also think that this plan is to try to help identify why, and maybe identify the right types of businesses. Just get more pinpointed data. And I also think that if many of those businesses are closer to Yukon, like Wellington Pizza gets Yukon people, but then it's like they're not going to drive further down to like where Phelps Market was, or Santilli's, or whatever you want to call it. They don't go that far. But if there was something that was drawing them a little bit further each time, I think that there could be a business in there that they might potentially go to. So I feel that these funds will bring a return on investment. I mean, you could say the same thing about anything, that's been done. Like I think that the school building committee had a budget, but you could say, well, people, we don't know, but they're not going to vote for this. They're not going to vote for that. You don't know what they may do if presented with the right information. So that was all. And obviously I support this. And it is also money. Well, some of the money, I think we spent a portion of it, but there was earmarked money that we weren't able to distribute to businesses because we met all of their requests. So it was already earmarked for EDC. So it would be appreciated to just shift it over to help it grow and continue to do good in the future. Thank you. That's it.
I sent John an email just to get his opinion on whether or not he thinks 30,000 would be sufficient. So we have to adjust the scope, but that he thinks that.
Yeah, I don't know how much is. I was just curious if you thought it would be, could come in less than 40, not nearly suggesting a number. I think it absolutely has value. Just all of these things have value. It's what we do with them after that, and not just us at the table, but residents. When we spend funds on a strategic plan like this and then start to see some results of it, it's what the residents do from there to say, look, we got your input and this is what you wanted. And when it comes in, and there's always the possibility there'll be pushback. But to Samantha's point, you don't know until you get to that stage. So I think it's absolutely a valid use of funds and an important use of funds that I think we would be hesitant to do outside of ARPA money.
I mean, and we can keep it tabled, until we can hear back from John or whatever, but I really think that this one is very important.
But I don't see this as a CIP item.
No.
And so it would end up in a budget and it would skew a budget for a year so significantly that I don't know that it would make it through the budget process. So if it's going to be done this, I think this is the perfect use for those funds.
Mike, did this project, was it submitted by you in your role with the town, or was it submitted by the EDC commission?
It was submitted by the EDC. We talked about it at the meeting. It's sort of in response to everything that's been going on and this idea. The EDC and Samantha will jump in if I'm saying something that she disagrees with, but the EDC as a whole, I mean, they're volunteers, so they don't necessarily know what they want to do, but they generally have there's a very strong consensus that there's not a great picture town-wide. People don't necessarily understand what sort of the town looks like fiscally 5 years out or 10 years out. And it's easy in the moment to talk about, we don't want this, without thinking about the ripple effect for 15 years, or we do want this, but in the same way. So the idea was they wanted to come up with some type of a plan that would analyze all of these things and pull them all together and really embark upon some roadmap that is palatable. And so we arrived at this strategic plan because we want to think critically about where we are and where we want to go and pull in all those types of information, but they want to include some type of financial review so we can see what does Wellington look like 20 years from now if we do nothing.
Right.
Because I think they felt pretty strongly, and I agree that it's a question that we don't think about. We're worried about what's right in front of us, whether it's open space acquisition or commercial development, and we're not necessarily thinking about the implications on the mill rate. Even small businesses, how many, whatever they pay in tax year after year after year after year over the course of, 20 years, millions of dollars. So we're trying to summarize all that data in a concise way, but it wasn't something that I put together.
I think if you take the need for a clear need for a facilities plan, we did some, put some money into roads, road management, pavement management, money into this, and then we've given ourselves a blueprint for the things we know we need as a town in order to maintain and make some progress. And then it's going to be up to, all the different voices and leaders in this town to say, to help people understand why the things that we're asking for, and the dollars that are associated with them. And here's the data behind it. So I get excited about a study and then jaded by it when nothing's done. But there's a clear voice currently that would like us to gather the information, and not just, and when I say voice, not just to stable our mind, and actually do something with it and show taxpayers why we're asking for X, Y, Z, and what that's going to get us as a community. Because we have to continue to move forward. And what that, give them a whole vision of what that looks like, and all of these things in place. They're just expensive.
Seems to be in my lifetime, as the businesses and communities tend to grow out towards, away from Hartford towards Sturbridge. So I remember Manchester, I remember Ellington. I raised my family in Ellington. There wasn't a lot there when I raised my family. It was a dairy community, and it still is in a lot of ways, but it's nothing like it used to be. And it took a while for the community to embrace that. I mean, just getting through a school budget year after year was just Herculean. And finally, they began to accept that the schools needed that, the investment in education attracted families, and the generational change began to happen. The younger families came in, began to have a voice. They wanted schools, they wanted athletic programs, they wanted things, and the services in town to support those families. So, I feel strongly that it's a function of government to prepare the town for that. When there's very few options for revenue, besides raising taxes, the obvious revenue source would be becoming attractive to businesses and families to settle here, and that would have a lot to do with school. So there's a lot on the plate here if the town embraces growth. And part of it might be the generational change that has to take place. But it will come, I just don't know when. I don't know when the community will accept that. But I think it's a function of government to prepare the town for that. So I agree with a lot of the things that were said here today.
And Ellington is a great example of a town that's been able to maintain its rural charm
It has.
with still having a little bit more available to both the resident and the tax base, right? So, you know, I'm not saying we need to become that, but we need to start to move in a forward direction that fits into our vision of Wellington. And if that vision from townspeople is they want things to stay exactly the way they are, that comes with a consequence as well.
But they can't.
Right, they can, but that
Because they don't want to pay more
right,
taxes.
that
either,
consequence
is
is more taxes, so
What are
right,
you gonna
we
do?
we
It's
have
the
to have,
most expensive option.
we have to
so
have
it's-
growth.
They're
And
the same as the most expensive option.
yes.
And the community needs to grow to support the businesses that want to come in.
Right,
Right.
and we've already seen a change in, you know, I would say the last 7 to 10 years, where we were seen as very business unfriendly,
Mhm.
and we've seen a change in that direction, so 1.5 million square foot facility aside. And so just that change is one step in the direction, but if we can put some plans into place and then work slowly to speed them through.
So how would this work though? Let's say we approve these funds, would we need, first EDC would need to come up with a scope of work, and then would it go out to bid or would it automatically go to your company?
No, it would go
No.
to bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's some real estate and analysis and other things, it would be, I'm thinking about it in my head and we will have to structure the scope depending on the amount of funds that we receive to see what we can do. It may be that we have, we come up with a project that includes 10 steps and we request qualifications from folks based upon how much money we get to see how many of those steps we can get done. And maybe we can do step 3 and step 8 in-house, just sort of get us there. So yeah, I think we have a basic scope that was kind of that John sort of presented as far as the minimum deliverables. But how many sites, if we do specific site analysis, how many of those that'll impact the costs and some of those things. So we'll have to determine what's really important to the EDC once we see how much money we get. But we'd have to bid it.
So we have 100, if I'm reading your spreadsheet right, we have 114, 428, 26 available to allocate. That 50,000 is out of that.
Right.
How much do we have?
114, 428.
That's what's left right now.
Right now. And a $50,000 contingency.
Which is already removed from the 114.
Yeah. Yes, and with, without putting the request from CIP on here, there's still $8,000 left, $8,436.
And then how would we receive in like this facility, or the CIP request? How do we
I
go
think,
about
I think
that?
the motion now would be to accept it for consideration, because we're not really reopening the submissions.
At the
So,
very least, it needs to go to public hearing.
right,
Right.
so we need to accept it as something to be considered at public hearing, basically.
Do we need to know how much it's gonna cost to do that? Like when we go to hearing, we typically have a number. So is there a request? Because obviously that could fluctuate.
So my original request to CIP was for 30,000.
Mhm.
We took a look at what sort of to get some costs back. I can tell you on those buildings in Mansfield and the scope of their work, we spent 103,000. So I would think at maximum, somewhere between 40 and 50,000, no more than 50. And we can tailor the scope of work.
I mean, do we have to do both? Are you suggesting we do both?
Both the strategic.
Facility and economic?
Well, I'm saying we can't approve, yes, because they're two different things.
Right,
And they're both needed. We can't take action to, in my opinion, today on the facility one, because I think it would need to go to a public hearing. We've taken the information based on the library submissions and some CIP work and said, let's try to do this at this phase using ARPA money. But I know Christina and I had that conversation. I think it needs to go through our process. So received in a way and it first accepted here and then a public hearing before we could take action. So I'm suggesting, yes, potentially we do both, but we couldn't take action on both today.
we don't have enough money to do both.
We do,
Oh, we do,
Because the 50,000 contingency.
right, because there's 114,000 available,
plus the 50,
but the 50 is already set aside, so we have 114,000, the 50, think of it as a project that's already been accounted for.
So we have 40.
Because
for EC.
Christina's notes say
That's
the 14 is the
30.
remaining minus the contingency plus the return dollars.
So it looks like we have 151 worth of requests left. Or,
Yep, that's correct.
so we have 151 ask, 114 to give,
Plus 50, that's.
plus 50.
That's in the.
So assuming the 50 that's off to the side, if that were to go to something like this, there's still, what, we're still shy. Whoa,
And all that's left is.
37,000.
is The playground and the library gutters after this. So,
it all seems to pale when you talk about an economic strategic plan, though. It seems like if we don't involve ourselves in something like that, we're just headed for the same old year after year, putting fires out. You know, to me, if this committee were to prioritize what's left, I think it would help me understand where we are as a group before we go to the town. But if you're suggesting the facility evaluation and economic development are equal in value, then we go to the town and say, what do you want to do? I guess, what do you want to do, right?
yeah. So
But to
we
me,
will-
economic development is, and I've never seen the results of an economic development plan. Are they really valuable, or are they just pie in the sky things? Or
No, I mean, that's the whole point of trying to get the scope dialed in so that it's data and it's information rather than a blue sky. You should consider this. I mean, we can consider anything. That's the.
It's still
VLCT.
subjective,
Yeah,
right?
but
And I
it's,
think to your point, it's still a little, right.
I wonder what we're really gonna get. Whereas gutters, we get gutters.
But
I'm not saying, I'm
Yeah,
not trying to pick on it.
yeah, no,
I
get
think
it.
it's a priority, but I've never been involved with one, so I bow to those people that have.
I'm not either.
Me neither.
And I think the plans are hopefully also an investment to the town. Yes, you don't get anything for it on a piece of paper, but the information provided gives you the blueprint for moving forward from there. And if you don't do that, like you said, well, putting out fires, be at ARPA or CIP, oh, we need a gutter, we need a wall, or whatever, but at some point, you need to look at the bigger picture. What are we doing to both the buildings and economic development?
I'd love to hear what the town thought about it, but I've sat in enough meetings to know that a handful of people come on and we don't get a lot of feedback until we vote on it, and then it gets squashed. But I mean, going out to the town, I think is appropriate. I'd love to hear what they have to say about an economic
But
development.
we already
strategic
did
plan.
that, right?
What-
We already took that to a public
Okay.
hearing.
What was-
It's the.
But if there were no
facilities.
comments,
Right, it's the facilities one we couldn't take action on today, because we haven't, that hasn't been through our whole process and a public hearing process.
so we're at the point of just approving the economic strategic
I
plan.
think so, I think that's what,
Yep.
Whereas this, you need to go.
yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm trying to find a strategic plan. All right, here's a strategic plan that I did for an organization that I work for. Now, I'm not going to work on this one specifically, but I'd love to, talk with an advice. So from this strategic plan, there are 9 different initiatives. This is just to go to you, Stuart, to speak to your question. And we'll have like 5-year outcomes: increased number of residents engaged with MHAGA sponsored programs, improve job opportunities. Now, even though those, to me, I know what you're saying, those could be like, they're not quantified goals. It's like increased. Okay, so it's quantified a little bit to say we want it to be more, but how do we get there? So then after creating this with the goals, then I worked with this organization to create actionable steps. So what does that mean? How are you going to reach those people? You know, if you're trying to increase the numbers and you're not successful, let's pivot. What's happening? You know, is it communication? Are people canceling? A lot of people didn't actually have rides. This was social service and they weren't able to get transportation. So could we try to solve that problem? So when we're talking about doing this for small business or business in Wellington, I think we are getting into the nitty gritty, and that's why we're looking for a little more funding. So we're not just saying, we'd love to have businesses in the corridor, that would be great, but townspeople don't want it. It's actually to be able to complete a survey, to do the, it's very like labor intensive, you know, you need to be able to create a survey that has a lot of internal validity. You need to be able to distribute it in a way that is very, that brings a lot of responses, because it's not random. It'll always be self-selected. That brings its validity way down. So you want to be able to have a lot of responses, because that'll at least bring the number, the N up and give it more statistical validity by it being up. So we want to do that, you know, and then be able to analyze the results by both quantified and qualitative analysis. So I hope that answers your question. I think it's going to be a little bit more targeted. That's why we're going for this, so that we're able to say this percentage, similar to like if you look at what's been done recently. Well, these are concerns residents have, but 42% want this, 53% want that. We want to be able to say the same thing using numbers for a wide town-wide research on what people would feel comfortable with in their neighborhoods, what type of businesses they might see, and where they are. You know, whether it's friendly.
Samantha, I think the most challenging piece, and I absolutely think this is something we should invest in. I'll start with that. I think your most challenging piece is going to get respondents.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, even if you could do mini incentives, that's what we used to do with mini incentives, as small as it is. We'll give you a gift card to this or something like that. I don't know how that would fit in, but we would give away $10 coupons off of rent to get people to respond back to us. So I don't know what that would mean, if we would be able to do that with these funds, but incentives are huge to get them to give back, even if it's just like, oh, we'll give you a $5 Dunkin' gift card if you respond. So that's one thing we could try. I don't know if it would be an approved use or not, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's.
So, but, you know, obviously be working together, because this is something I've wanted to do. I don't know, you know, how the bidding process works, who would come in, but I've wanted to do it. I just don't have time to do that. I mean, that is a consulting job. That's a whole job. That's what types of things that I do for other places in small ways, and, you know, in mini consulting projects, and get paid for it. So it's really difficult to just put that energy into doing that. So, I would love to support the project, and I think that I could add a lot to it. So I don't know. I personally think we could do a lot with 30 as well. But Mike, you said you were going to talk to
And this scope
John.
project, cost alone would mean it would have to go out to bid. So you put together an RFP and you put that out, and that would take care of that process. So can I ask Mike, there are funds and maybe Samantha can answer this, in the EDC budget that support consultants, and in this case, it's John who works with EDC. And is that would be above and beyond this, right? So in addition to this, so completely separate.
Yeah.
There would still be the need for that ongoing
The
support at EDC.
Yeah, John could manage the project, would prepare the RFP, and then could do whatever internal stuff we were gonna have to take on to get the project within whatever the price is that we got. But beyond that, there really is there's no other funds within the EDC line.
Okay.
There was a little bit increased last year for the sign project that they're working on. But there's no other line items or expenses.
Okay. So we're at the point, if we want to take action, we need a motion, right?
It's the dollar amount that I'm standing on.
So I'm gonna make a motion to approve ARPA 45 up to $40,000.
I'll second that.
Yeah,
Any discussion about that? More discussion? No? All right, I guess we can vote then. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay,
about that,
okay, great. So
good job.
we made a
Thank you guys
decision.
for,
Yeah, I
That's a
mean, if
good
you come
deal.
in less, that will be just a plus to another project. But I think it's important work, all of these pieces together. And if I've said nothing over the last couple of weeks as we've worked on this school building project, we tend to take studies and sit them on a shelf. They have absolute value. It's what we do with them as a community. So they're very difficult to find funding for in our typical budget. So this takes a little bit of the pressure off there, but will give us the, I think, very valuable data we need as a community.
and the hope is that we will be able to get the businesses in to give us more
That's what I'm
funding.
hoping, right? That this data brings
Within our
us
lifetime.
some results.
Exactly. And-
So is Mike managing this process?
The
economic-
Economic Development
Yeah.
Commission is, and Mike doesn't.
We have an economic, I'm sorry.
We have
Sorry.
Samantha sits on the Economic Development Commission. She's their representative here.
Okay.
So they work, they've hired
So you will,
Tai Chi as well. And so John Guskowski from there helps support the EDC. So
excellent.
they will draft an RFP and go through the whole procurement process of a study like this.
I mean, towns think strategically about how to do this all the time. You know, a lot of towns really push for any type of medical because medical is really expensive to tax. So a medical office building may tax 3 times higher than a regular office building because you tax the equipment. You don't tax most manufacturing equipment, personal property, it's exempt in Connecticut. So even if you have that and it creates a lot of jobs, you're not getting money from the interior of the building. So you only get revenue on the building itself. The Planning and Zoning Commission just approved a cannabis retailer in Phelps Plaza, which they're in the process of doing their build out. We will get 3% of the gross receipts from the sales from that store direct to our general fund every year. So there's certain types of businesses that have a larger financial footprint than others, pound for pound. So, I mean, towns do this sort of whatever we're trying, this will help us be cohesive how we do it, but we're getting there. I mean, Phelps Plaza is basically full at this point.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
So Derek
Oh, there we
King,
go.
Rowan
Which
Jones
is,
said-
listen, that's why I try to end most of my Board of Selectmen meetings with, when you can, please support our small businesses and restaurants. We need to remember that we want them here and we don't want another business here, but we still have to support what's here.
Mike, what would have the tax revenues been on the warehouse project?
I think their sort of
In the 3
high-end
million.
number was between 3 and 4 million a year for the real estate.
I repeatedly say, couldn't they have brought us something more appetizing?
I know.
And so that,
I know.
but very truthfully, that's a question that we need to answer. There are people that don't like the warehouse. There were people that don't want anything on that site. The owner has made it very clear, I'm selling the parcel. So do we need to put all of our efforts into trying to acquire that as open space? Or is there something else that might work there that is a middle ground? We need to figure that out. Maybe it's a smaller building, maybe it's something else, but if they develop it to residential, the town will see a net decrease, right? We're gonna have to
Mhm.
pave the roads, maintain the roads, get $4,000 or $5,000 a house, but you're paying 12 to 15,000 per student. So if you get 1 kid for every 3 houses, the town loses money. So we need to look at that and say, okay, what do you want to do here? You know, there may be something else that works on that site that the town is supportive of that isn't 1.5 million square feet, or maybe not.
Now, if a property is already zoned commercial or industrial, does it still have to go through townspeople approval?
So basically everything, although one of the things that we changed to help work out things like Phelps Plaza is the commission moved a lot of the uses to being allowed by right, which means they don't have to go through a long public hearing process. But pretty much everything else has to go to public hearing. So it's not a referendum, but anything that's gonna happen there, not any, but most things will require at least 1, 2, 3 public hearing. which is seen as very high risk in the development community, which is why they do it.
Can I make a motion? That we accept the request, I'll call it ARPA 47, for a facility study for town buildings. Or, I'm gonna say 50,000. I think it can be less than that, but I hope.
I'll second.
Any discussion about that one?
We're calling it ARPA 40.
47.
47. Yep. Any discussion?
You may have discussed it already, but this is for the current town building or for a future town building, or did I miss?
Current buildings, Samantha.
Buildings, like
Buildings.
town office building, center school,
Public buildings, yeah.
Library,
library.
senior center.
So are you, with center school and stuff, are you waiting until the referendum to determine what buildings need to be included in this study? Or is it like, will Hall School need to be included, or you're not sure yet?
Well, right now, Hall School would need to be included, right? So there hasn't been a positive referendum, but if there is, it excludes using either of those two schools. So I would say it would need to include both. Yes,
And they're just gonna go in and analyze what needs to be done to bring the buildings up to code and make them like modern
I think
as
they're
a facility study?
a little bit more broad a scope of services. So evaluating the need for repairs and maintenance, as well as like space and needs analysis of the town. So here are the needs of the town, the facilities we have, and how all those spaces can best be utilized.
I'm just wondering why those consultants need $50,000, but the EDC consultants don't need as much. Like, buildings seem less than an entire town, but like, that's a, you know what I mean?
I think the scope of work is, on both of them is more. I'm not suggesting less. Mike had already said to us he could drop the price from 60 to 40, and I just wondered if it was possible to do it for less. That was just my curiosity, right? And so
Right.
based on work that's been done, 50,000 is about the cost of the kind of analysis we'd want on our town facilities and need to help us move forward. I'm hoping it would be less. I mean, we have a lot less buildings than Mansfield did. Again, theirs was 16 buildings and $103,000. Gas.
You said you might exclude the fire stations, and you're not sure. Wasn't in your motion, but I guess
I
that's,
didn't, I just said town facilities.
Okay.
So when we go up the scope of services, that will need to be
but
determined.
I'm not
And I
suggesting we don't need that.
I simply say that because they're the projects that are moving forward with the fire departments won't leave us a need for a building to analyze.
One of them.
No, it's not our building. If they build a new firehouse, that firehouse is not the town of Wellington.
Well, I agree, and if they're
So,
moving across the street, but realistically, at Station 13, you know, what is that gonna need in the next 10, 5, 10, 20 years for maintenance just on,
Station
What's there?
13,
yes.
they won't you be,
One example being, you gotta reskin the entire outside of the building because it's rusting away.
you're not gonna do any of that as part of your scope of work now?
No,
You're only adding something
We're
on,
only
you're
adding-
not addressing the needs of the facilities there?
yeah, no, it's only, the scope of that was an addition, not to maintain the current building. And if the addition doesn't go through for whatever reason,
Those,
there's still maintenance issues.
the count of those buildings are in the amount that I've asked for,
Yeah.
so. We just have significantly fewer buildings than they do in Mansfield.
Mhm.
Do you know how were those costs structured based upon sort of just like a price per square foot? Were they structured based upon the actual type of building? Do you know, like the bid in?
I didn't, I broke it down simply to, you know, the overall dollar amount, and you could kind of go by building. But it took some time to get the dollar out of them. I haven't been able to see their the actual
It would
winning.
be different for each building. I mean, the
Yeah.
library, I don't think you're looking to do an analysis of location and use. Where, some other buildings
It's that location, that building would be utilizing the services, the needs of the services in Wellington and the buildings we have. Does the library offer some ability to you host services there, right? Is there, at one point in between library directors, there was a discussion of Parks and Rec, possibly working out of the library, and there being some grant funding for that kind of collaboration, and they had space. So I think they've got a lot of space at the library, so utilizing that as part of a space needs discussion is important. I wouldn't rule it out to assist us. So,
I think it's important for, if ultimately the renovation or maintenance or whatever is gonna be town funds, and I think it's important for the town to know. But the town paying to come up with a list of things that need to happen at the firehouse and not being in control of whether or not they happen, it's, I guess, a separate discussion. Thankfully not for this commission, but it should be, but perhaps it informs the town's decision to give X amount of funds on a yearly basis with an understanding of monies will be used for certain things or whatever, but little willing to nuances.
The two most important things we've probably done came at the very, very end. That's
Right.
amazing.
Did we vote yet? We didn't.
No, we
vote.
didn't.
No,
vote.
but-
All right,
this
okay.
is just
On bated breath.
accepting it. This isn't anything approving it. This is just accepting it
That's the
to
stuff.
move through our process.
The economic development plan, we've already gone. to
That's right, we
town,
spent that.
So we are
Yeah,
Yeah.
approving this.
yep, that one we
Move forward.
approved.
Right, so I guess, is everybody ready to vote to accept this project to be an ARPA?
The facility,
Yes,
okay.
yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Okay, so we're gonna need a public hearing at some point for this project. And potentially other projects if we decide to open it back up again at some point. Just so you guys know, as people finish up their projects and return money back in, we could have another $50,000 to give out. So we're just at like a kind of interesting place here where we just need to wait a little bit and maybe there's gonna be some more funds. So maybe at some point we will open it back up. Probably not for months though, I would say. So if we want to move on this quickly, we should probably determine when we would have a public hearing on it
Great.
sooner than later. Well, so one thing we could do is just say like, the first meeting in March is a public hearing meeting, not one of these afternoon meetings, and have that one on there. Maybe we'll also have some things to close by then.
Yeah, I think the agenda would be short enough to do both meetings at once.
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. And I don't think we need another meeting in February. So. Does that sound? good?
Christina,
Mhm.
I just have a question, and I don't know if you know the answer or Erica knows the answer. It's about the one that we just approved to go to public hearing. Would we need to define, does the referendum need to happen first so we know which buildings would be included by the time it's gone to public hearing? Does it need to be very defined? Or is it just up to $50,000 for buildings and we don't need to define which buildings they are?
Yeah, I think that we don't have to define, the whole process is gonna take a while, I think.
So it's
determining which-
fine for it to go before the referendum.
Yeah, I
That's,
think
that's all. Okay,
But either way, it still needs to happen on.
Okay.
On many of the buildings, so,
And the money may cover all of the buildings you want, it may not.
Right.
You won't know that till
You
you
might need to
put it
prioritize.
out to bid, prioritize which
Yeah,
buildings.
you might
Right.
need to-
right, but at least there's some money, there will be
But
some
get
money
it going,
there,
yeah,
so,
let's get it going.
yeah.
So what date you have in mind?
We're usually the first Monday of the month. So that would be March 6th. And that is also probably a selectman meeting
Definitely.
day. When do we have our meetings at night at
And we-
6:30?
6:30.
I have to look at the
5:30?
I have a lot of,
I think so. Could,
I think so,
could we do it 5:30?
I think so.
Would everybody be available at 5:30?
So the sixth
Yeah.
at
Be available
5:30.
until
On the 6th.
6:30.
Yep, 5:30.
I can't remember if that's the date we
Yeah,
took action for the referendum,
Um,
but it wouldn't be till 6:30.
okay,
So if we don't get the hearing concluded quickly enough, then maybe there's no potential action, so that it doesn't bleed over into board of selectmen if we have the time.
right,
I mean, it should be a quick meeting. It's one item on
one
that.
item.
The last one was over 2 hours,
That was a lot of items.
even on double speed on YouTube.
All right, well, so we'll be in touch to remind everybody when it gets closer. We have to do a whole public notice and all that stuff too, so,
what committee would oversee the facility assessment plan? Did that come out of your
Board of
office?
Selectmen.
that's like-
Who?
Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
okay, well,
Okay.
with that, are we,
Have to redefine the.
Ready to
very specific
adjourn?
Scope.
So moved.
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thanks, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You're getting there.